Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today I have with me a Feng Shui expert and an interior design person who's also a clutter expert, helping us understand how to declutter our lives, get our energy flowing again. Her name is Krystal Holm. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have her on was that so many people in the past few years, when more and more people have experienced trauma, and they are experiencing the backlash of depression and anxiety, what they find is that their environments can get out of control, particularly in 2020 when we were all in lockdown. Many people found themselves trapped in their environment, and as their mental health deteriorated for understandable reasons, so did their environment. So there used to be the whole Marie Kondo thing about, if it doesn't bring you joy, release it. She has since admitted that she has re-embraced some clutter. So it didn't actually work all that well for her, and it doesn't work all that well for a lot of people. But we're trying to find out how to get the best energetic flow from your surroundings and how to reclaim your environment if it's gotten a little bit away from you. Krystal, hello, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Hey, Krystal, how long have you been doing this?
Um, Almost 20 years now.
Okay, so now, do you go to clients' homes and help them start organizing things? Do you put together a plan for their home, or is it advice that you offer for people to enact in their homes, or is it both?
I don't go to the homes any longer.
Okay.
Not very often. I had an injury a number of years ago, and when I became disabled, it just became much harder for me.
Mhm.
And so I took my services online, which was great when that whole pandemic happened. I was able to help people all over the world,
Exactly.
instead of only in my backyard. Um, so it's had its advantages to not going into the home anymore, but it also, the other advantage that I have found really is it it becomes more of a group project,
Mhm.
right? It's they are still doing the work, which allows them to take more ownership of it and continue this practice after I'm not working with them anymore.
Exactly.
It gives them that power of an ownership and methodology, because I've developed my own methodology over the years, and I teach that to them, and that allows them to just like maintain. It just makes it easier.
And that is something that people need to keep in mind because I find this with a lot of people who have anxiety disorders or who are struggling with their mental health and depression, which please remember, mental health is just health, guys. Your brain is the most complicated part of you. It tells the rest of your body everything to do. Please don't judge yourself if you've been struggling with what is essentially your mainframe as it breaks down under stress. Almost anybody's would. And there are maintenance that we can do, maintenance programs essentially that we can do within our lives to help improve our mental health. And one of those things is actually taking control of your environment. And it's interesting, Krystal, because the modern age has made remote working so much more accessible to people. And then the pandemic normalized it. So the very thing that kept us socially isolated also created a different form of valuable social interaction and access to help. So when you're talking to people about clutter, and by the way, the fact that you can't be in somebody's home and it falls to the client to do that is actually, in terms of magic, an excellent practice. I'm always telling people the more work you put into your magic or your manifestation, the bigger results you will get. And there is in magic, in the new moon and the full moon, the new moon being for manifesting, the full moon being for releasing, you're supposed to clean at each, basically bi-weekly event when it comes to the moon to create the space for the energy that you're trying to create. And if you are the person doing that work, you have more control over that energy. So, from a mental health standpoint, and again, from a manifestation standpoint, actually doing it yourself is the best way to get the best results from it. So, was this something that you were drawn to when you were younger? What drew you to Feng Shui? And by the way, can you define for us what Feng Shui is, please?
Yes, and yes, and yes.
Yes. Affirmative.
Okay. So I started sort of with magic first, actually. I learned about magic and manifesting when I was like 9.
Mhm.
Um, and before that, it was miracles, you know. So I've always known about that power.
Mhm.
I kind of grew up with it, and I grew up seeking it, searching for it, studying it. I I actually grew up in a severely abusive home, and so for me, I was trying to magic my way out any way possible. So it led me to a huge study of all sorts of things, witchcraft, energy, women related stuff for a couple decades. Um, it took me a while for me to find my place. Um, Partly because of my abusive childhood. I was always told I was really too stupid to be anything other than a mom, and somebody's wife. If I could catch one with my brainlessness, you know. And
It's
so
very true that we believe ourselves to be capable. We're programmed to have a relationship to self, and I do have like you're in good company here. Almost everybody has the same backstory because like energy attracts like energy. And it is difficult to overcome the idea that if you've been told that you will always fail or anything you do is not good enough, that becomes imprinted on you as your self image. And going forward, we have to find a way to claim our self image. And the work that Krystal does with helping people take control of their environment is one of the ways to begin to reprogram your self image into a positive energy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just kind of wanted to cover that because so many people struggle with their inner dialogue. And there's neuro-linguistics programming, which helps you learn how to speak to yourself more effectively and more positively so you can get better results. So back to you, ma'am.
I'm glad you threw that all out there. So um, I did all that too along the way, right? I
That
found my
box
own
checked.
right, my
Yeah.
own healing journey, right? At some point I figured out that look, I had to work on me. Like I was sort of the center of my unhappiness, right? Nothing in my life was happy. And I was the center of that. So I went back to school to become an interior designer. And it was actually in a psychology class that I had to write a paper on something related to my field of study. And at the time, I was a single mom working full time and going to school full time. And I didn't have a lot of free time to read stuff that I might be interested in. But this was long enough ago that Feng Shui was actually pretty new in Western culture. I mean, it had been around in China for thousands of years. And it here we'll throw in the definition. It literally translates into wind and water. But it is the study of the flow of energy in your environment, both the natural environment and the man-made environment, and how those things marry together to um, create an energetic frequency that makes your life and you in it like the best version of you, and therefore the best version of your life. It's just all about getting energetically into alignment to create that manifestation of what it is that you're trying to get into alignment with. Is
Also, frequently, particularly trauma survivors, you're obviously a trauma survivor as well. They struggle with a feeling of a lack of control in their lives because when you grow up being unsafe at every turn, and particularly from your caretakers, it feels like you have no power and nothing is within your control. Part of the benefit of practicing something like Feng Shui, of decluttering, of reorganizing your environment, is to give yourself a feeling of power within your own existence because you do have power over the clutter. Even if it seems overwhelming, you just start taking it apart one pile at a time, essentially. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you is that so many people suffering from trauma. And I'm like, although I'm sorry that you had that difficult experience, I'm also glad that you can understand where the audience is likely to be coming from in this. Is that it is also very, if you didn't, this is an interesting line. If you didn't learn a good relationship to self because your caretakers were hypercritical, which caused you to be hypercritical of self. You are set up for failure because you've never been told that you can be anything different. And your positive attributes, which you have them, were never emphasized. Instead, everything that you did was criticized, which then leads you to believe that there is a futility in your existence and a futility in everything that you do because you have been told you are destined to fail. And one of the ways to start taking basically command of that narrative and becoming somebody who believes in your own power is to have power over the environment that you're in, no matter what it's like, no matter what you have or don't have. You can improve things by organizing them, and an energetic flow that gives you the idea that I have control over more than I am telling myself will immediately begin to make you feel more powerful. So there's a lot of psychological validity to the idea of Feng Shui, which in celestial and angelic magic, which is what I practice, it does work with the guardians of the four corners, who are the guardians of four elements. And when your elements are out of balance, and a lot of people in spiritual communities get too much air and not enough earth. And remember, your environment is the earth element. And this is part of the reason that interacting with it more powerfully will bring more manifestations into your life. All right, ma'am, back to you again. We were talking about Feng Shui. I cut you off again. I'm sorry. I'm so prone to that. Please forgive me. So Feng Shui is literally translates into, did you say wind and earth? Is that it?
Wind and water.
Wind and water.
Energy flows like the wind, but it is stopped by water, right? It's or it flows like water, like in a pathway similar to water, like rivers and stuff, right? That's sort of the way that energy flows.
I have a lot of water within us, so.
But at the time, it was a relatively new thing in Western culture, and so I'd heard of it, but I didn't have time to study it really. And so this psychology class was sort of a boon, right? I got to pick my subject. And so I actually wrote the paper on the psychology of your space and how Feng Shui and how the energy affects it. And that was sort of the whole synopsis. Is that the word that I want? That was the thesis of my paper. Now, I didn't understand Feng Shui by the time I wrote that paper. I think I was actually more confused when I turned it in than I was when I started, right? When I started, I was like, I understand energy, manifestation, home, got it. That part
right, if you're working with ABC, it's easy to see.
Right, it makes sense.
But it goes all the way to Z, so what else is contained? Yeah.
Well, I went, and to write this paper, I went to the library and checked out every book they had on Feng Shui, which was like a 2-foot stack of books. And I proceeded to read them all. And like one book would say one thing and this book would say something else. And like every book seemed to contradict each other. And there was no cohesion through any of them.
Now,
and so I was like,
okay, go ahead, please.
So I was like, I understand the premise, right? This makes sense to me. But at the time, I was still very much in my trauma. I was still very much living my trauma. And so I was still very much in that perfectionist stage of, I must understand it. I must understand it in its entirety. And so I started to study it, and I would practice it in my own home. And not really, very few select individuals, but mostly I was practicing it in my own home. And does it work? Does it not? Let me experiment. What does this book say to do? And I was trying to understand how it worked. And that actually took me a bit. I was playing with it for a few years, how does it really work? How do I understand this? And I finished school. I started working as an interior designer, and I'd moved overseas. And to Hawaii.
Okay. So you were in the United States, but you had an ocean between you and the mainland. Yes.
Yes, and I had quite a few international clients. The first of which happened to be this project of it was a couple from China that the firm I worked for, I had just started with them. They had already submitted the design. It was done. They submitted this to the homeowners, and the homeowners sent it back saying, the Feng Shui is all wrong. Somebody needs to fix it. This is end of project. We're going for final signatures before the project goes into installation and ordering and everything. So this was a really bad time for it to come back as a big no, right? And so my boss had pulled everyone together, and I was the only person to volunteer.
Because you
to fix it. I was the only one that admitted I knew anything at all about feng shui. And I didn't. Like, all of my insecurities came up, all of my imposter syndrome, like, oh my God, these people must know more about feng shui than me. Like, I really don't. I can't, like, what if I mean, everything it brought up. And I was very much on my healing journey at that time, but I was very in this growth stage of still learning. And I went back to school for feng shui, to actually study it. And at that point, I was on this, I was very much on my healing mission. And I remember I was going to a retreat, and we were having this conversation. I remember telling this girl, like, I want to start my own business. I want to start my own interior design firm, but I really want to do feng shui with it. And I want to help women, you know, change their life. Like, I want a different life. I want everything. And I don't want anybody to tell me I have to wait for it. I want a business. I want a partner. Like, I don't want that. That's not my sole objective in life, which is sort of what I was raised to believe. Like, get you a man and then all of life's problems are solved. Like, I was like,
the thing
I
that has
want,
enslaved and entrapped women for like,
right.
yeah, that
I
one.
like, I want one, but I don't want like one like the ones I've had in the past. I'm healing my relationships with men. I'm healing my relationship with myself. I'm very deeply engrossed in my growth at that point, and I really wanted to help other women do the same. And um, I got involved in this like year-long program, and it was to help me with my relationship with men and to find love. And I was in, it was a group thing. So I was with all these other women. And I was like, let me help you. We'll feng shui your house to help you with love in your relationships and, like to make room for all of that. And it was such
I'm
an
only
eye.
laughing because I help people heal from codependency, and it's like, no, guys, first you heal your relationship to self, and then you build a happy life for self, and then, like, it's like I get it. What you're saying is like you did the thing like in a healthier fashion that you had been told was the point, and
But
so
at the same
wow.
time, it was so eye-opening for me because this was really where my education started, like my true, because it was like I knew where I was and I knew what I was learning and knew what I was trying to create, a space that was open to a partner, right? And I was like, let me help these other women with this same thing. And they would all just get stuck, like with we would be talking about their room, like they wanted a room for a new man to come in, and yet they couldn't get rid of their husband's boxers out of the dresser drawer. And it's like, sweetheart, we we have to, we have to let go of the past. A new man is not going to move in and wear your husband's underwear. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, we've got to. And so I started really getting the psychological education of what your clutter has to say to you and how how it is a reflection of all of that internal stuff that was going on. And it was how I really started developing my own method for decluttering, because like you mentioned Marie Kondo, and I always was kind of like, I don't know. It didn't quite register with me. There was just something off about it. And the more I worked with clients, and the more I was like, that's like, we need to be focused on the clutter, not on everything else. Like, everything else is not clutter. Why are we focusing on that? We need to focus on the clutter part and deal with it. And it became like this whole healing tool for me. Like, I was just coaching them with everything that I had learned, because at this point I was probably a decade into the personal growth thing, of healing my own self. And yeah, it changed everything about how I like what I thought. It changed everything about how I worked with clients, and then of course I had that injury that took me out of being able to work in person, because I was still doing design clients, like in-person design clients, but all these feng shui clients were all over the world.
Mhm.
And so when I was injured then, I just sort of was able to combine the two and expand my work. and go more and go global.
Well, and I'm sure you've met many fascinating people. And one of the things that you're talking about, and of course, what I tell people is that until you need to take time to heal from a relationship. If you're just trying to queue up the next relationship, spoiler, you're going to have the same relationship over and over again because energy signatures repeat, which is actually part of the idea of energy management through clutter management is you're trying to change your energy. Now, like there's nothing wrong with wanting love and there's nothing wrong with wanting a partner. And it's interesting to hear that Feng Shui could aid in the idea of partnership coming in through energetic flow. So yet another reason to take control of your environment, because there really is nothing wrong with searching for love. Just make sure you're not searching for it to complete what you believe is a missing piece of yourself, because no other person can actually complete you. You have to be complete in self, and then you find the person that you're meant to be with. And until you do that, you have karmic partner after karmic partner. But it is interesting that energetic flow can be managed for greater wealth, for greater health, for greater love. These are all, everything that is related to the elements is something that the idea of Feng Shui can lean into. Almost every practitioner I know has a money bowl or a crystal bowl where they have the crystals that are related to money coming into a household, and it's a Feng Shui concept. Now, there's a lot of numerology in Feng Shui, is there not?
There's a lot of math.
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's just the people that I've met who practice it are always very centered on whether or not an address can have this number and that number, and like fives are unlucky and things like that. Which, by the way, I don't know if fives are unlucky. I just pulled a number out of my head. Is that related to Feng Shui, or is that an adjacent belief system that is being married to Feng Shui?
Well, there's original Feng Shui, which is a few thousand years old.
Mhm.
And then in the 70s, some guy invented like black hat Feng Shui, which is
Yeah,
more
that
of
means a lot to spirituality.
which is his philosophy of Buddhist principles and some decorative stuff. And so it's not Feng Shui at all. But it's called Feng Shui, and they do a lot of uh, on top of that, I mean, there was a lot of times that over the centuries, the the empire tried to flood the market with false information too, because originally it was a secret for only the wealthy,
Mm,
right? Only the emperor of China had it, and he kept the feng shui masters essentially like slaves. I mean, they were
that's not true.
well paid slaves, but they weren't free. Like not like we think of slaves like in the south of the United States, slaves like in China where they are like concubines,
Mhm.
right? They serve at the pleasure of the emperor in whatever he wants. Um, and so the feng shui masters, one of them escaped a number of centuries ago and tried to bring this knowledge out into the world. And so he only taught it to like his family. It was a descendant of his. I don't remember now. It was a son or a daughter, and then the married partner of that. Like they kept it in the family, and they just expanded it very slowly.
It's
And
a
they
form
wrote
of
it down
magic.
in
That makes
poetry
perfect
form.
sense. It's energy
They wrote
magic.
it,
So yeah.
yeah, and they wrote it down in poetry form with a key code, like a map, right? And so a lot of times people got a hold of those poems and assumed them to be literal. So there's a lot of crap out there that goes around about you need a red dragon or a green turtle or a white tiger in the north and this and that. And all of that is fake feng shui. None of that is real.
Ah.
The feng shui has 5 elements. Um, you know, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And that's it. So if people are talking to you about this magic bagua mirror or this foo dog that you need to have, that's fake feng shui, all of it. If they're talking about there's a lot of stuff out there that's fake feng shui, which is why it took me so long to figure out
It sounds
what's
like there's
real
a
and
lot of
what's not.
conflicting information out there. Just really briefly, I'm going to touch on something that you referred to, which is the 1970s. 1970s, man, did they ever do a number on spirituality? Because it was a time that people were finally stepping out of very rigid conformist societal structures, and they practiced some really disrespectful forms of cultural appropriation. And, it's not that people from other cultures cannot interact with what are essentially these magic energetic management practices. It is that at its heart, it does need to have respect for the origin and for the people who originated it as well. And I will tell you very, very honestly that whenever I'm reading somebody, and like every now and then we're dealing with curses, whenever I'm reading somebody from China, or it frequently from Taiwan, it will show up there as well. There is a type of magic that they practice in China that, holy moly, the first time I ever saw it in somebody's cards, and they were aware of it already. So when I was like, what is that? They're like, oh, it's this family curse. And it was seriously one of the biggest energy jams I've ever seen. The longer something is in practice, the more it will be able to accumulate that the idea of a coven magic. So the more people who are involved in something, the more energy is behind it. And there are lots of bastardized forms of all different forms of magic. Chaos magic originated in the 1970s as well, which is very much a cafeteria style. Hey, don't pay attention to any of these structures that they were trying to do. And I think Feng Shui and yoga and a couple of other spiritual practices, including, I just did an episode on twin flames and how, like, maybe not pay attention to that. That was made up by a chick in 1972, and she did not know what she was talking about at all, and really was enabling a lot of relationship dysfunction. And so what we're dealing with is a time period. So we're dealing with teachings from a time period where the people who were trying to affect and bring about change were trying to blow everything up, because it was this very, very rigid structure that had made people deeply and completely unhappy, trying to adhere to rules that have nothing to do with our spiritual happiness, our emotional happiness, or even our mental health. And the way they did so is the same way that anything starts: clumsy, inaccurate, prone to disaster, because everything starts things become refined over time. So the westernized version of Feng Shui is essentially what you're practicing currently, correct?
It's not what I practice. No, I don't practice that crap at all. That's garbage. And that we can actually lay that at the foot of Donald Trump, if you want to know the truth, because in the mid 90s, when he was breaking ground on Trump Tower, there was a lot of Asian businessmen coming into New York, and they were buying up real estate, and he wanted that money. And they answered to the call of Feng Shui. So he hired somebody, not because he believes in Feng Shui, but he hired somebody to Feng Shui Trump Tower so that those people would snatch it up in the millions. And if you go back and look at the research, those units sold like hotcakes.
Oh,
and
I'm
so
sure
everybody was like, oh, Feng Shui. The next thing you know, everyone and their dog has a Feng Shui book out. And nobody knows what they're talking about at all.
Well, I think the rise of Trump is
book.
magic gone wrong. Honest to goodness, it's clear that, like, magic got done to try, and just like the Kennedys, because it exists in all walks of life. But people will joke around about the Kennedys being cursed. It's like, I'm sorry, but the Kennedys actually appear to be truly cursed. Like they wanted power more than they wanted a lot of things, and they made sacrifices for that. And do I mean literal ones? Not that I know of. I haven't looked that deeply into what they may or may not have done. But Trump and his ilk, people who are capitalists bent on gain at any cost, actually did do a bunch of things that invoked magic powers. And only you can see me when you're talking, so nobody else was seeing me over here face palming over, oh, sure. I just talked about how the magic from China, like, astounds me from, like, the strength of it. And it's like, oh, he just went playing fast and loose with it to make money. Sweet. I'm sure.
Oh, it's hilarious. What's hilarious is if you ever look at interviews of the woman that did the Feng Shui, she takes credit for all of his success because of the Feng Shui that she did on his and I mean, she does get credit for it. I mean, Feng Shui works, whether you believe in it or not.
Yeah.
But and so he is what really made it mainstream in the United States. And then, of course, like I said, everybody and their dog wrote a book, and suddenly everyone's an expert. But mostly they did the easy way. And I see it a lot. I see people online that are like, I've looked at Feng Shui. It's too much math. I don't want to do it. I just do it my way and what feels like. And I'm like, that's great. That's intuitive design. it's not feng shui, and please stop calling it feng shui.
Oh God, that is
Because
such a good point. By the way, you can adapt things from other practices. Just please don't think you're then practicing that practice.
right, because
You can
then that's why
bastardize
so many
anything and get
people walk
results.
around and say feng shui is fake or it doesn't work. And it's like, well, of course it doesn't work, because you got all these people doing fake feng shui. They're not doing real feng shui, and they need to stop calling it. It's like Krystal's feng shui. No, I didn't make up my own feng shui. I practice traditional Chinese feng shui, and I actually make a lot of videos for my YouTube channel about how to tell the difference, and what's crap and what's real, and like what to stop doing. Don't stop putting your energy into wastefulness, because and stop selling wastefulness. Like,
And by the way, you're making a really good point. You can accidentally tie your energy in knots if you're practicing something incorrectly. One of the things that I see people doing wrong with magic is that they do something and they don't have the patience to wait to see what will happen with it, because it takes a while to reshape reality, y'all. And so they'll do another spell, and that didn't work. And 2 weeks later, they'll do another spell, and that didn't work. And so they do another one, another one. It's like, do you realize that you basically just tied an energetic knot that is almost impossible to untie by yourself when you do that? When you do something, and I did an episode on what the most powerful thing in magic is, which it is patience. You have to step into a real process. You can intuitively interpret many things and get good results, but you will really be your own worst enemy if you do not go with the flow of what you are creating. So you have a YouTube channel, good, because I'm always asking my guests about free resources that they offer to help people understand things. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
um, it's just under my name,
Okay.
on my
Krystal
YouTube
Holm.
channel. And actually, yeah, I have a short link actually for it, because YouTube is just like all the letters and numbers and stuff, and I don't think I've actually changed it to
Okay.
like I try to do it, and I don't know. I need to get somebody
So
technical to do that.
I'm gonna spell your name out so that people stand a chance of finding you then. It is Krystal with a K, Krystal, Holm, Holm like Mary. Is there an S on
Mhm.
that, or is it just Home?
Nope, just home.
Awesome.
And
So Krystal Holm, she has a YouTube channel. She'll help you understand the feng shui not to do and the feng shui to do, but you also offer services as well. Can we get to talking a little bit about clutter? Because that's the thing that I'm really hoping to help people to understand, because depression is a form of addiction, believe it or not, in a lot of ways as well. You become used to an energy and convinced that you can never get out of that energy. And the thing that we have to do is if you want things to change, you got to start changing things. And if you are living in the midst of out of control clutter, first of all, please don't judge yourself. It is okay to lose control of a situation, but it won't get better until you start trying to master it. And so what I tell people to is set aside 15 to 30 minutes, no more than that, because people become exhausted and overwhelmed. In what you will do in that time period is begin to go through that particular clutter, whether it's cleaning off your kitchen counter so that you can then wipe it down. And by the way, please quit hoarding stuff. If you didn't use it within a 2-year period, you're not going to, please get rid of it. It's very, very rare for people to need something. There are certainly table saws, that doesn't apply to that. I'm talking about things that have regular use. T-shirts, old medications. Start divesting yourself of the things you no longer need. Letting go is a giant thing in getting energetic flow to begin moving again. So just start one bit at a time. But what is your advice to people who are overwhelmed by the amount of clutter that life creates sometimes, and then a tendency towards despairing and a sometimes hopeless reality is creating for people? There's a lot of people suffering from an inability to address what's going on in their own homes. What do you suggest?
oh
That's a big
man,
question.
it is. It's a huge question. It's like the magnitude of that question. It is so individual. It really is. It is so individual, because everybody's at a different stage or at a different state. Um, I, I have discovered over the years of working with clients that there's very specific methods to decluttering. Otherwise, it's just going to repeat. Especially if you've reached a state where you're hoarding, right, and you have just too much to even start. it's hard to start on your own, right? You really need some hand holding there. That's where you're already stuck. And even if you do get started, it creates its own PTSD because it is a symptom of a psychological something that's going on internally. Your clutter is always a reflection of what's going on internally.
It's true.
Start
Your
very
exterior
small.
world, it reflects your interior world quite a bit. And
It
that is
it
why taking control of your exterior world can begin to improve your interior world.
Right. Um, but there's a whole psychology to it. Like just throwing away stuff because you haven't used it in 2 years may work for 50% of your stuff or less. But then you have to start diving into the diagnosis of that clutter, so that you can disconnect from the energy of it, and dissolve those bonds to it, so that you can dispose of it and not have a repetitive pattern. Because otherwise, you can throw it away, and within 6 months, you're just going to have a whole house full of
Exactly. It
clutter
will
again.
reaccumulate
It's
because you haven't actually changed anything.
because you haven't done anything of the internal work. And so your clutter has a lot to tell you if you can learn to listen to what it has to say, and then do the work. Once you start seeing it as a tool instead of as an obstacle, it becomes a lot easier. But yeah, start small. Like you said, I don't even say 30 minutes, just start with 15. Because as you start to declutter, even declutter one junk drawer, that shift in energy will give you energy. That's part of how that works, right? Once you start to open up that clutter, the energy goes into you. And so now you have the ability to do 30 minutes or, eventually an hour or more. And sometime you're going to hit this point and it's going to be like this tipping point. And all of a sudden, you're going to set a timer for 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes or an hour. And you're going to just be so engrossed. You're going to bring your head up and 5 hours are going to be gone by. But you have to reach the tipping point to get there. And in order to do that, you have to start. And if you're not even able to start with 15 minutes, start by just opening the door and getting some air moving.
That's true. That's true.
It just gets
There's something I
energy.
want to address though, because
Mm-hmm.
you said that people can't do it on their own. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. A lot of people are completely isolated. They really don't like they've withdrawn so much because people in depressive and anxiety ridden cycles quite frequently withdraw quite a bit. So here would be my advice. You can put on Krystal's channel and listen to her as you begin to go through the clutter and to organize things to be thrown away. And the reason that I recommend that people decide to get rid of their crap first is make room. Make room for new things, even if it is a repeating cycle, at least it gets things moving. And when I'm talking about people who've really lost control of an environment, one of the ways to manage triggers, which people with CPTSD and PTSD have so frequently, is to interact with your 3D environment, and cleaning is one of the ways to do that. Whenever I'm really stressed out, I do not have a dishwasher where I live now. It doesn't bother me. I thought about buying like one of those, ones that you can put on a counter or roll out of the way. And I found that it was really helping me to very deeply interact with all of the self-care practices that we put into life. And that's what I need people to hear as well. When we're talking about, please don't judge it by a societal standard of, if you have a beautiful home or not. You will never be able to control what other people think if you don't care about it. Please try to set yourself free from that and start caring about what's going to make me feel better. And your external world can genuinely begin to impact. It will give you a feeling of power. And again, when you're trying to manage things related to trauma, what you want to do is get out of, because people with PTSD and CPTSD frequently struggle with dissociation, and interacting in a physical capacity with your 3D world, which decluttering and working with the energetic practices that will bring better flow is an excellent way to do that. Because a lot of the patterns that people develop around triggers are very detrimental to their emotional well-being. And if you're improving a situation as you're struggling with an energetic trigger, what starts happening is you're reprogramming the compulsive need that so many people who suffer from PTSD and CPTSD, they do things in a cyclical or a compulsive fashion. If you begin to program them towards things that will benefit or improve your environment, you're starting to get a handle on a process that will work for you for self-management. So that's part of the reason that I'm like, hey, if you're alone, it's okay, but start with getting rid of as much trash as you can. And that is genuinely about trash. And also, people have a hard time when we're trying to resolve our past issues. We have a tendency to hold on to things from the past. And so, one of the reasons to let go of things that you are no longer losing, a lot of magic is symbolic. And when you do something symbolic, when you release something that is no longer serving you, everything in your environment is meant to be serving the life that you are living, then you are creating the energy for healing. So you start doing things that serve you. So that's the theory behind why to do it and combine it with Feng Shui is for energetic management. Energetic management can also benefit your emotional management. So that's part of it. It's a CBT thing, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for anybody who I haven't defined it for every single time I have an episode. So I'm so sorry I keep cutting you off on this, Krystal. I genuinely don't mean to. So if people are working with their clutter and I'm sorry, would you continue with your advice and I will try to keep my actual mouth shut for a little bit?
I don't remember what I was saying at this
Sorry.
point. So
I'm genuinely so sorry. You were saying that people need to begin with 15 minutes and that they'll find themselves in a process. 5 hours will pass after a while because they get in the flow of doing that. And what do you see the results of that being in a person's life? Because you know how to help somebody manage their clutter and their environment. What does it do for their inner world? What have you seen it do for your clients?
well, it completely changes everything about their life, right? When I work with clients and the way I teach people how to declutter specifically, it's all about doing that inner stuff. So it completely changes how they see themselves and how they feel about themselves and how they interact with themselves and with the world, with their space, because their space is just a reflection of themselves. But then also it changes in their outer world too. I've seen people go from being completely isolated and not literally not wanting to talk to anyone to starting a business and opening up an online shop, um or being able to get divorced, because that's some hard clutter to let go of.
It's
you know
the idea
um
of symbolic focus and magic comes back again and again. When you begin examining for your life for what belongs there and what doesn't, and what aids you and what serves you and what doesn't, it has a ripple effect. It's like throwing a pebble into your own pond.
yeah, I've seen people find happiness in their life again, and I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just to be able to find happiness in their day-to-day life, to be able to wake up and live in joy, um, and not have all the anxiety and all of the depression and all of the constant just beating down, right? The hammer. Um, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is the change in who they are and how they see themselves.
And what's it
Um,
for your life? Because we started talking about your traumatic backstory and being a single mom and the struggles that go along with that and trying to find time to simply be a person and learn new things. And what's it done for you? What's the benefit of this energetic management in your space that you have personally felt?
um, I'm a completely different person too. I mean, um, same and yet completely different. I was single for almost 10 years, actually. And now I've been in a relationship for 7, I think. And it's the best one I've ever had. Like, I've never had a relationship where I felt safe and comfortable being myself. Not even, I mean, even like with friendships. Like, I never felt safe being myself before. Not ever. Not even with my best friend. Like, of 35 years, I still couldn't be myself with her. right? I couldn't be myself in any relationship. There was always some part of me that I felt like I had to hide. And now I don't feel like I have to hide anything
So it
from
helps you
anyone,
find your authentic self.
for sure. And I was one of those that when I was young, I think I just wanted to be famous. Maybe that, like, I wanted to be a singer, I wanted to be an actress, I wanted to be and my parents were always telling me how awful that was. And so for me to even have a YouTube channel was hard for me to like break through that box and be like, I will just, and I do stupid things sometimes. And I don't even edit that out. I'm like, I snorted. Oops, we're leaving it in. Like, I'm just fine with being myself and letting the world see who I am. And if people like me, that's great. And if they don't, that's okay too. Because I don't expect everyone to like me. I'm not for everyone.
You don't like everybody. Not everybody's going to like you.
Right.
And like,
But
that's
it took me a while to
like
accept that
everybody.
about
Don't
myself,
worry
that
about it.
I am not for everybody.
Exactly.
Like, not just to say, like, it's okay that people don't like me. Like, no, I'm not for everyone. I know that. Um, and yeah, it really helped me. I changed my whole life and I started a business too. Right? Like, I mean, and that was probably my childhood dream, was to have a business where I could help women
That is like essentially
empower. Yeah,
empowerment
empower
for women
women,
is
empower
incredible.
themselves.
And particularly for abuse survivors, because you were in a situation where you felt like you had no power, claiming your own power and getting to know yourself. And, 10 years sounds like a perfect time period to be able to build a great relationship with self. And that's really what's at the root of all our relationships, is our relationship to self. If we're not comfortable being our authentic self, it's because we haven't really accepted who we are. We don't love us as we are. And we learn to do that. And what we're really talking about here are management techniques to put into place to improve somebody's entire world relationship to self and relationship to the world around them. Feng Shui is a great tool in that. I do not practice it. I have, like I said, celestial and angelic magic has its own deal. And so I do everything inside of those parameters, and it works for me. But I do know so many people who really prize these techniques. And so I'm glad that you're accessible to people on YouTube as well. I'm really glad that you developed a method that you can share with people through the work that you do, because that's having people get overwhelmed and they won't take the first step. And I need you to hear something, everybody who's listening, who's like, I can't, I can't, I can't. If you keep telling yourself you can't, you will be right, because you won't try. If you start telling yourself, I can try to change things, then start changing things. Everything starts with the ability to take that first step forward. And it's okay if you're stumbling around in your first steps. It's okay if you snort when you're on your YouTube channel. My first YouTube video is hilarious to me, because I even referenced in it all the research I did told me that I'm going to look back at this and full body cringe at how awful I am at it. And sure enough, I'm like, oh, I was so stiff. Holy God. In comparison to who I am now. And I was joking about it. If this all goes well, we can all look back and laugh at me. Remember, that is the attitude to take. Every single person you have ever met has made a mistake. Every single person you have ever met has feared failure. And if they don't, then they very likely have a personality disorder, because it's part of the human condition. It is okay to not be great when you start something. It is okay to have a mountain of clutter in your world that you need to take and chip away at in a process. It's okay if things got out of control as you were not feeling well. Remember, your physical body and your mental health are deeply related as well. You can take control of your mental and your physical health. And the easiest way is to start by interacting with your environment positively. And Krystal Holm has a method for trying to help you learn how to do that in the traditional fashion versus the 1970s, oh, that guru do fashion that so many people have encountered. Please hear this part as well. Look into the origins of almost everything that you're practicing. And if the words 1970s spiritualist or guru preceded, do a deep dive, folk, because it's not going to have a lot of valid information. And there are good reasons. They really were, kind of people who were trying to rebel against structures that had made people deeply, deeply unhappy. but their first steps were clumsy, as all first steps are. And please remember that, and please encourage yourself. If you have ever had to encourage another person who is developing, a child or anybody else that you care about, even training a puppy, you know that the best way to get good results is to interact positively and encouragingly and validatingly and affirmingly. Start doing that to yourself. Whatever's going on in your life, whatever's going on in your environment, you can make it better. Things can get better. You can get better. And people like Krystal Holm can teach you how. Krystal, where can people find you, please?
Goodness. Well, if you want to have a conversation with me, you can book a complimentary design consultation at peaceandprosperityalignment.com. Or you
link in the description box, guys.
And they can actually download my decluttering method at declutteryourmindset.com.
Awesome.
I'll send you a couple emails.
We covered that as well. Like I said, if you're listening to this in the audio version, check the description box for the episode. I always drop my guests links in there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel because you prefer the visual, because I guess I do funny hand moments or something, I don't know. Anyway, there are people who only watch on the video, then look in the description box down below and I will have the links down there again. All right, Krystal, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise. Even though I clearly don't know much about Feng Shui, I truly believe in the idea that if you powerfully interact with your environment to make a positive change, you can gain power within your own life and within your own mind and conquer that thing that haunts trauma survivors, is the responding, not reacting. What we're talking about with energetic management is teaching yourself the ways to respond to the energetic needs within your life. And sometimes the energetic need is for better control. Sometimes it's for better magic manifestation. And sometimes it's for a feeling of peace and tranquility, which comes along with an organized space as well. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. This has been Logical Magic. I am Alane. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book a tarot card reading or a life coaching session with me. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, Cronecast, at the Rising Moon. And is there anything else? So yes, you can always find me here, Logical Magic, examining Esoterica. Live magically and take control of your energy.